there's no, it's not just one grade, it's all grades, basically.
Okay. Wait, so you said it's all grades, it's not just one, it's all the way 9th through 12th.
Yep, anybody, it's like an open elective class, so anybody can take the class of any grade.
Oh, and it has something to do with music, so all the kids are taking your class.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty popular, and kids be, skipping class to come to class.
You can't skip your other class to come here?
Hey, I see why they do it. And then the funniest thing is they be in the class and they don't be doing the work. And then when they get out of the class, they're like, oh, Mr. H, man, I wish I was in your class this year. I was like, yeah, you was in my class. But why did you do the stuff while you was in the class?
Right, absolutely. Right, you weren't applying yourself when you were in the class.
Just one student last week, he was like, oh, man, I went to guidance. I got my class changed to yours. And
cool.
I was like, all right. And then he got to change back. The kids would be funny. Like this one kid, so we had this little period. It's kind of an enrichment period where all the students get to go all over the school and teachers have different clubs and classes.
Mm-hmm.
And so this one kid, he signed up for mine because he's already in the audio production class, so it fits in line with what he do. And then he comes to the enrichment period, and I was like, Eric, like, what? Is he not on the roll anymore? He's like, oh yeah, I know. I switched to study hall. I was like, so then why are you in here?
Study hall.
I wanted to do both. I thought I could just come visit. I was like, why would you sign up for this, switch out, and now you back? Just, you're not making any sense to me.
Right. He probably don't even know why he did it himself.
And his friend was right there. He's like, yeah, he told me we were going to be in here together, and then he switched out. I don't know why he switched out.
And who wants to go to study hall?
Kids are funny. I don't know what's changed since I was in high school. When I was in high school, the library was kind of like you went there when the teacher took you there. That was it. Or if you really needed a book. These kids be loving the library. I don't know what it is. I guess it's because stuff has changed. You can have food in the library. Like, we have never done this.
Oh, really?
Food in the library. Food in the library. Just chairs and lounge. Like, yo, this.
Oh, that was lit.
Yeah. So kids, this one kid, he used to say, oh, Mr. Hanks, can you write me a pass to come down to the music studio? I was like, okay. And then he would use that as an excuse to tell his teacher, and then he'd go in the library with his friends.
Oh, wow. It was like a lounge library. Well, let me refresh and do a reintroduction because we also are streaming on Instagram. I'm sorry, not Instagram. We're also streaming on Facebook under, what is your name on Facebook?
Vernita. Who his? Am I?
Oh, I'm sorry, Bernard. Mom, what's your name on Facebook?
Vernita N. Jabez.
Okay, so we are streaming under Vernita N. Jabez on Facebook. We tried the Instagram thing, but Instagram is acting funny, so we like to kind of go back and forth. So for those of you guys who are just tuning in and have just joined via Facebook, thank you for participating in 6 Saturdays where we speak about communication and how you show up in the world. And we are having this every Saturday. Last Saturday, we spoke about the elephant in the room and how it is hard to communicate sometimes when you have difficult topics, and how we can make that a little bit better when we're showing up to people and speaking about some difficult issues and topics. Today, we have a special guest, Bernard Hankins, who was able to join us. He is a philosopher. He is a creative thinker. He is a musician, and he also is a Christian. And today's topic, we're going to talk about identifying shame. But so we won't get so far into the meat and potatoes before you guys are actually on here. We're kind of just chit-chatting and talking about some things. And Bernard, earlier I did notice that you did mention that you were a Christian, right? And so initially when we spoke or when we met you on Clubhouse, you also weighed heavy in that you are also a philosopher. So how does the combination of those two things work in your life? How do they work in your life? Or, do you find any conflict or kind of any kickback mentally within yourself being a Christian and also a philosopher?
My favorite subjects. Well, at first let me define philosophy. Like when most people hear philosophy, they think of, Greek, Plato, Socrates, deep thinkers. And so I do enjoy those thinkers, those books, that kind of idea of philosophy, which you traditionally think of. But honestly, to me, philosophy just is self-examination. It's, I build a house, I need to inspect my own house. My neighbor can't inspect my house for me. They may be able to see a few cracks or something, like, oh, I noticed this was falling off, but I have to inspect my own foundation.
Yes.
And see, like, oh, this is messed up. I really need to fix this. And I think that's right in line with Christianity because, Jesus, he's talking to people. He says, how can the guy with the pole in his eye talk to the guy with the speck in his eye and be like, hey, you need to get the speck out of your eye? He's like, you need to concentrate on the pole in your eye first. You need to correct yourself before you go correcting other people. So I don't think there's any conflict. I think people might see conflict if they grew up in a very, churchy kind of environment. They think, oh, you can't read anything other than the Bible because the Bible is like the only source of information. It's like, well, that's your foundation, but you have to have a way to apply it personally.
Right.
So, when I talk to people who are Christians, I'm like, you can read the Bible and you can quote it, but what does that mean to you? You can't just read some text and say, oh yeah, I get it. It's like, no, it's personal. You have to have a personal digestion of what you hear in a sermon.
Right. That's facts. And so really with that explanation, I mean, I guess they kind of go hand in hand. You don't really have a conflict when it comes to, one with the other because it kind of goes together.
Yeah, I think, well, the thing about philosophy I love is, philosophy really gives you, like today we're talking about identifying shame. I think philosophy gives you vocabulary or tools to identify topics. We all have things that happen in our life. But then when somebody puts a word to it, you're like, oh, that's why I feel that way. Like, I think it's interesting. The term microaggression has come out in the past, 5 years. And that's probably something people felt before, but until someone gave it a label, you weren't really able to, put a sort of form around it. Now it's like, oh, yeah, that really helps me understand it.
Right.
So philosophy helps you come up with specific words and labels and tags to be able to identify things. So one classical words are objective and subjective. Those are two, I think, important ideas that people should always understand because they speak to different parts of us. So if something is objective, it's sort of big picture. And then if something is subjective, it's more personal. So you can't have one and not the other. I can't read the Bible and just be like, God loves the world. It's like, okay, well, I'm Bernard. Like, I need to know how God loves me.
Right.
and that's for everything. If you go to any kind of school or anything, you learn math, you learn science. That's why I ask these students. It's like, okay, great, you learn the concepts in school, but what does it mean for you?
Right.
Like, you learn this class, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to apply it to your life? Just because you learned a subject doesn't make you anything. You have to personalize it.
Right. That's very, very true. That's very true. And it's important to just really know, the philosophies and the things that you know to be true. Those things that are constant. And like you said, the most important, how does God love me? You know what I mean? How do I show up in the world to others? It really just starts, at the core of who you are and what you are. And then you're able to kind of really show your authentic self and really meld and gelled and have better relationship with others because you're kind of set on, who you are and your foundation. And it might change from time to time. One philosophy or one way of perspective or whatever might work for a season. But there are certain things that, especially in Christianity and philosophy, that are golden rules and remain true no matter what the transition. So it's kind of great to, be able to, have those things as something that is a foundation, a foundation. Hold on one moment.
Okay.
What's this? Instagram. I was saying, you probably don't have followers. I was saying go on your Clubhouse and tell your followers.
I think I already on that.
Oh, that was your Clubhouse?
Oh. See, I don't have it on this phone, so.
Okay, so now that we've basically talked about philosophy, this is being recorded. I hope, are you recording this too, Bernard, or is it just me?
It's just you. I usually try to record more stuff I do, but I can just get it from you.
Okay, well, we're gonna see. I'm trying to get a good recording. Like I said, this time we're on Facebook, so we don't have as much of a presence, but we're still recording nonetheless. And then I'll probably try to send it to you on Facebook also. But let's kind of get in the meat and potatoes of the subject that we're talking about. So today we're going to discuss shame. And there's so many definitions of shame and what shame is viewed as. It's basically a culmination of something that you collect over the course of your life since you have been born. And it really cultivates who you are and how you can express yourself in the world. And so I remember that when we were speaking about it before, you had made some profound points regarding shame. But let's start with the very beginning. Okay, what is shame to you?
Okay, so that's a question that I've been exploring this whole year. So I'll start with a story. So I went to this spiritual, this guy named Rob Reamer. He has an old ministry based around what he calls soul care. So there's a book called Soul Care, and then he has these like 4-day retreats where you kind of unpack your life's history, family patterns, behaviors, spiritual inventory. But then they also have spiritual deliverance. They're like, hey, after we go through this stuff, if you still are, trapped by this stuff, you probably need some spiritual deliverance. So I called, I scheduled an appointment with one of their people who they trained. And we were going through all these different questions. And then he said, hey, have you ever dealt with fear? And I was like, oh, yeah, of course, all the time. Like, when I would go out my room and my roommates are out there, like, I just, for whatever reason, there's this irrational thing. And it's like, you can't go out there right now. And I told him, it's like, makes no sense.
But that sounds like shame. And I was like, huh, really? And then he said, yeah, it sounds like you don't think you're worthy enough to be the president. And I was like, interesting. I never would have considered this shame, because normally you think about shame, you think of like, oh, I stole, or I robbed, or I cheated, or I cheated on my wife, or whatever. So normally you associate shame with like your own personal wrongs that you've done and you feel bad for them. But it seems like he was saying shame is more to a sense of unworthiness. And so I think I would start with there. I would say shame begins with this feeling of I'm not worthy.
Wow, that's deep. Because I think we all experience that at one point or another in our lives. And I think it's very present. And just for those who didn't hear, because we had some other people, run that back one more time, because that was deep. You said that he said it seems like it's if you didn't deserve it. Run that sentence back one more good time.
So I told him I was afraid to go out just, into my common area where my roommates would be. And he said, that doesn't sound like fear. It sounds like shame. He said, it sounds like you don't feel like you are worthy or deserving to be in the presence of another person.
Wow.
Wow. So how did you unpack that? I mean, what was your immediate response? I mean, I'm curious.
Well, first it kind of, like I said, it's one of those things where, like, you think you know, and especially since I'm a person who does this work all the time with myself, I'm like, nah, I know what I'm dealing with. It's fear. You know, I was like, how you gonna tell me it's a different thing now?
Right.
It's not shame. So one, it was kind of like, dang it, I've been on the wrong path, and the other time it was kind of like, oh, well, good, at least somebody's able to see what I couldn't see and help me. And so it was just, I don't know, it was kind of like semi-annoying and semi-freeing at the same time. And so I started to consider what he really meant. I was like, okay, what do you mean I don't feel like I'm worthy to be in someone's presence? And okay, so here's where I think things get interesting, because I think shame, like you said, use the word unpack, and it's funny, the soul care, his whole metaphor is you have to unpack the suitcase of your soul. So he's saying, you know, we have all this stuff, baggage, and you have to go through one by one and pull it out. So think about yourself as sort of compartments. Like a suitcase has these different zippers and, you know, different compartments or cubby holes or whatever you want to call it. I think shame is interesting because it can fit in one cubby hole, but then maybe you don't feel it in the other cubby hole or compartment. Because if you told me I don't feel like I'm worthy to be in someone's presence, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I have lots of friends. I know people like me. They enjoy me. They tell me, you know, people who I'm around are happy to see me. So if you would have ever told me you don't feel worthy to be in someone's presence, I would have been confused, because I've had plenty of experiences where that's not true. But there seems to be something about this particular experience, just going out into the common area, where there's something about this experience where it's like, okay, what is it about this interaction specifically where I'm feeling this inability to be in someone else's presence?
Wow, yeah.
So even though you have on the outer appearance, you have all these friends, you feel loved, but it's that issue within that you didn't realize that you had to tap into deeper, you know, to really feel this within yourself, I guess.
Well, I think I would say more it's, well, I'll give you another example. I don't think it's so much about the outward. It's more about the context.
Okay.
Because another example is, for instance, I'm a philosopher, I'm a musician, I'm a creative poet. I have no problem getting on stage.
Okay.
You know, I'll get up with 1,000 people, and I have, and I'll feel fearless. I actually enjoy it. I feel at home on stage.
Okay.
But then if you put me at a dinner table with like 3 people, it's like I instantly become recoiled. Like, I got to get up out of here. Like, I cannot talk to these people. This is the most, you know, nerve-wracking experience of my life, to have to talk to 3 people.
Okay, gotcha.
So I think it's all about realizing, like, what context you're in, and then when those feelings come up, what is the meaning of that experience in that specific context.
Okay.
And that's deep also, because I think that I'm very similar to that too. Like, in a crowd of people, I don't mind, I'm comfortable, but when it's a smaller crowd, there is like a level of anxiety. So is that, but like you said to the guy, because I would be like, oh, I guess that's like fear of intimacy, or fear of like being so close to someone or whatever, or them being able to kind of peer inside of you. But he would classify that as shame, right? Also too, right?
Yeah, I think, I guess, yeah, if you think about it in that, okay, that's a good point too, because I went to another counselor one time, and he was saying, I was explaining to him what I just explained to you guys about, you know, on stage, performance, I feel at home, but, you know, in a small group. And they said, oh, yeah, but, you know, when you're on stage and you're being creative, you know, you're putting on another persona, and there's a certain level of control. And I will agree with that, because, yeah, when I'm on stage, it's like one directional. It's like, I'm the teacher.
Yes.
Like, I am here to talk to you. I have this information. I am the one who is the expert. You have to listen to me. Whereas in a social situation, it's like, oh, everyone here at the table is equal because we're just in a casual environment. Everyone's conversation is considered to be accepted. So there's no control. I can't make you listen to me. I can't cut you off. You can cut me off. And so I think, there's something too about the level of control that you might have if you're a performer versus obviously if you're in a social situation, you can't really control the dynamics of that interaction.
Right. That makes really good sense when you put it in that way. It kind of helps to helps us to understand how that can happen because normally you don't think of it in that way.
And then in a social setting, so intimate, that's when you can be asked questions where if you're on stage, like you say, you're in control. So if you're in a social setting, someone might ask you something that causes you to have to bare your soul, but you're on stage, you get to give out whatever, like you said, whatever information, how you want to give it, and people have to accept it, then the reverse. So that is something that's putting a person on the spot.
Right.
This is letting me know I gotta unpack a whole lot of stuff. I still got work to do, definitely. So when you're speaking of that level of shame, what kind of shame is that? Because we're kind of coupling that with fear of intimacy. We're coupling that with control issues. We're coupling that with so many things. Is that the basis of general shame? What level, of shame is that, or shame in general? Like, what is that level of shame that we're speaking of in these scenarios?
So I think this is where the philosophy tools are most helpful, and that's why I use philosophy, because to me, philosophy I see is sort of like a surgeon. It gives you this precision tools to be able to slice the different layers. Mm-hmm. So first, as humans, we have multiple layers. If we, the whole thing I always talk about is identity. And so the diagram that I've created for identity is you first have your individuality, which is just me, Bernard. There's certain things that are just Bernard. That's just who I am. That's who God made me to be.
Yes.
Then there's, sexuality, male, female. Mm-hmm. Then there's personality, introverted, extroverted. Then you have ethnicity, what do you identify with a certain type of group, African, European, Asian. Then there's all these other layers on top of that, which are probably more false layers, just like, oh, are you Democrat, Republican, and, what's your favorite baseball team? Are you from the North or the South? All that stuff I consider not true identity, but those are still nonetheless identities that people create. And so they do affect you, whether or not they're true or not. So any situation you enter into, you're going to be feeling all of these things on all layers. You just may not be aware of which particular one in the moment, or they might be overlapping. So I'll give you an example. For instance, as someone who's very introverted, when I enter into a room, even though I'm very comfortable with myself in general, I can feel this like, oh, it feels like I'm the only one in the room who's quiet and no one's talking to me. But then also as someone who has, African descent, that could also be like, oh, wait, are they not talking to you because you're African descent, or is it because you're quiet?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So we all have multiple layers working simultaneously. And so it's up to each of us to, when we step out of those situations, to kind of isolate and be like, okay, what was I feeling? Was I feeling something? Did I think it was a racially motivated thing? Mm-hmm. Did I think it was a personality motivated thing? Was it a sexuality motivated thing? So we can go deeper into that, but I just want to give you the overall way of how I look at it.
And because too, that kind of brings about the isms and the different things that you develop over time. The things that, we have developed and collected along with shame that kind of cultivates and molds some of the ways that we see things or see other people or other people see us. So that's really deep also, because it's such an intricate thing and has so many levels and layers to it that, it's like a thing that can, kind of go on and on, because it is a very complex thing in itself. when you're speaking of like shame in that way, and like you said, all the ways that you can actually break down shame, are those levels of true shame or false shame? Like, or is that a matter of perspective? How do you see the things that, I mean, the ways in which you identified shame? How do you see those things so far as being authentic or something that has been given to you by someone else?
Right. So yeah, I read a good thing on the internet one time, must have been like a decade or more ago, and it was saying, you know, let's break down what is shame. And they said there's actually two types of shame: true shame and false shame. And they said true shame is it's kind of like a healthy shame. You know, if you kill someone or you abuse your children or you do something, like, you should feel shame. It's sort of like a spidey sense, like, hey, you're going the wrong direction.
You did something wrong, right?
Right. Yeah. It's not a shame out of with no justification. It's a shame connected to some, truly moral infraction that you should probably feel some way about.
Right.
But then there was false shame is based upon standards that other people create, and then they try to sort of hoist those onto you. Like, oh, look at your shoes, you're so poor. Oh, look at you're overweight, or oh, how come you don't have these kind of material items, these cars? So some people will tell you, because I have this stuff and I think you should be this way, you should feel shame for that.
Right.
Oh.
And so that's false, because that's not based upon anything other than someone's opinion or someone else's, manufactured ideas of who you should be. There's nothing about those things that are true in the same way like a moral shame would bring about. Someone could look at you and be like, hey, man, you just smacked that person in the face. You should feel bad. And, most people would agree, like, yeah, you should.
Right,
but
right.
the only people who would agree with the false shame are people who have, an invested interest. Like, yeah, I got rich clothes too. Yeah, you should be like us.
Yeah.
Like, those are all just clicks and created identities that humans have decided to make up. So they're not based in anything of substance.
That's true. Yeah. And what's a kind of a marriage of the false and the true shame is the shame that you inherit generationally. Because, it's true in that it's following you generationally. It's true that some of the things that, are pointed to as shameful may be happening in your family, may have happened in your family for generations, may have happened in your culture. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it is true for you. You know what I mean? Just because these things happened in your family, or just because they are in your racial identity or whatever, doesn't mean that they're authentic to you. So that's something deep, because that's in the middle of both true shame and false. And so when you're doing the spiritual work and just going within to try to unpack some of these things so you can deal with them and move past them, I think that something of that nature would be kind of harder, because if something is true, it's just true. It's authentically true. If something is false, it's authentically, it's false. You know that it's false. It's something that's being put on you by someone else. But to have a combination of the two together is just something that is a lot to deal with, because you're struggling. You're like, hey, this is not me, but you have inherited via your family or your cultural background, or those lineages, those similarities that you have through generations. So what do you think someone in that case, and since you also deal with high school children, and they deal with, false shame and true shame, but they also deal with, the middle ground of those things. What do you perceived shame? How do you speak to not even just youth and young adults, but there are adults that are going through that as well. How do you speak to that? The shame is not quite true, it's not quite false, but it's just sitting right there in the middle.
Right. Well, this is where you have to get. This is like my whole focus of my life. If you look at my Clubhouse bio, if you anybody who knows me will tell you Bernard is all about identity. Mm-hmm. And so my fourfold thing though is self-worth, identity, purpose, and meaning. So that's my sort of microcosm, Bernard's universe. That's like, if you come into my world, that's what you're going to hear about all the time. Right. So if you focus on the identity of those four, to me, identity is obviously extremely important because I had a friend, her name's Kamisha. She wrote this poem called The Label Maker. And she is basically saying, the person who makes the labels gets to define the thing. Right? Mm-hmm. We talk about shame. If we go all the way back to Genesis, Adam and Eve, Adam's job was to name the animals. And they said whatever he called them, that's what they were. So imagine someone labels or identifies you. Bernard, you were poor. Mm-hmm. Or, African Americans, you are disenfranchised. Like someone else giving you an identity from that point on defines the rest of your behavior. Mm-hmm. I am poor, so therefore I act with poor actions because I'm just doing the mechanics of what identity is. Hey, if I'm a fireman or a firewoman, what do? I put out fires, right? If I'm a lawyer, what do? I practice law. So if someone tells you you are poor or you're stupid or you'll never be anything good, people who get entangled with that identity don't really see it as acting opposite of their nature. Mm. They think this is who I was told I was, so I'm actually proving them right, and I'm doing a good job. Are you proud of me, Dad? See? You said I'd never be anything. You're right. 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 So the first thing people have to do is they have to realize you have to do the work of unentangling your identity from the false identity. But that's tricky. And that's why you need philosophy. Mm-hmm. If you examine yourself, you can look at yourself. Like right now, if we take it in a physical sense, if I looked at my body right now and I was holding someone else's hand, I would know which hand is mine and which one is not. Right? Mm-hmm. Right. I would unlock my hands from someone else. Like, hey, that's your body. This is mine. I would uninterlock my hands from theirs or take my arm from around their waist and be like, we're two separate people. Please step away. Now, that's tricky to do if you've already become that and lived that for, 10, 12, 15 years. You just you just think this is me, right? You think this is just the way I am. I think about, I don't know did you guys ever see the movie Venom, the Marvel movie?
Yeah. Yeah. How he absorbs, I guess, the subject. Is that the one? With his venom?
Well, it's an alien suit, and it has like a symbiote, and like it attaches to the host, and that allows the suit to wrap around whoever Mm-hmm. So that's how I see shame. It's like you have to be the host, right? You have to. The only way shame can exist or an identity can exist if you say, "Okay, I'll host you. I'll let you live inside me," and then that thing becomes a part of you, and then it starts to speak in the I and the we. Until you forget there's a me. Yeah. You start to identify with shame or identify with whatever the identity is. They want you to identify with it first person, so that way you don't think about it as separate from you. So that's one why you need philosophy. But even for me, like I said, as a Christian, philosophy is not enough because then there becomes the spiritual aspect. I mean, there's some people who are philosophers, but they're still trapped in their own shame of, oh, my dad told me I wouldn't be smart enough, so that's why I'm studying philosophy so hard. I'm going to show him, So for me, as a Christian, the only truest freedom is, your true identity has to come from Christ because that identity is detached from anything of this world. Mm-hmm. Anything of this world is subject to being contaminated with shame, So that's why Christians, we promote the idea that your identity cannot be connected to something that's temporary or of the earth, because it will always find itself susceptible to being told, well, guess what? It's not enough. It's just not, oh, you're smart, but you're not smart enough. You know, you're rich, you're not rich. I mean, think about all these celebrities. They got money and talking about, oh, I'm still unhappy. Like, when will it ever be enough?
Right. But the thing is, in those type of cases too, we realize, if we're really awoke and conscious, that it's not so much the money, is that internal self of satisfaction. And like you said, the shame, like you said, of trying to proving, because a lot of times when celebrities get to a certain point in their lives, they say, you know, I was trying to prove this too, you know, and then after a while they realize that's not the end all the be all, and so when they unpack some things, when they de-scope their lives, then they realize I'm happy even without this celebrity, this money, these things. And that's the thing that people need to get to, because like you said, and my daughter said, is really understanding that the perception of shame people put on you, the shame from generational patterns, the shame you put on yourself because you're comparing yourself, is so many different things that causes us to have this shame. But we just have to kind of go back to basics. Like you said, as a believer, you know, the Bible says we are new creatures. And that's the thing, and trying to tap into that. What is that new creature for you? You know, and not looking at what man says you should be doing. Yeah.
And I think also something to look into is what happens internally and spiritually to you, where one day you just wake up and say, that's not me. Let me take this off. Because like I also listen to Abraham Hicks, and she uses this example, like, you know, God looks at you so lovingly and so caringly, and just loves you so much so to where when you feel bad about a thing, that is you separating from how your higher self and how God really views you. So the further that, the worse that you feel, the more depressed that you get, that is you falling further and further away than who you are, you know, at your core. And so it's kind of crazy, because sometimes it takes for us to have some of those very long periods of doubt, very long periods of depression, very long periods of seclusion, loneliness, these lower anxiety, these lower vibrational energies, to help us to understand that, hey, we've been in this thing too long. I have to really look at what part of this is mine and what part of this is not mine, and, you know, how do I start to reverse the steps in kind of, you know, repairing and cultivating who I am, and just taking on my own identity, instead of, like you said, immersing or being immersed in someone else's, you know, opinion of you, or, you know, what they feel that you should be, or what they see that you are. Because a lot of times that's kind of a self-reflection of them. You know, a lot of people's perspective of you or a situation basically just shows their perspective and how they feel about themselves. So it's just really deep, because usually it takes, especially if you're like immersed in shame, like you said, the suit with the venom, if you're immersed in shame, it takes some really dramatic things. It takes some really heavy things to separate you and snap you out of that, to say, you know what, this is not mine. I'm taking this out of my backpack. I'm, like you said, I'm letting go of your hand. This is not mine to walk around with.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I think. So you guys are the thing that I like to direct people towards is, I mean, like, everybody has their own beliefs, and so everybody's on their different levels. But like I say, for me, I mean, especially growing up as a Christian, you know, I've just been steeped in it for so long. I just personally, because this kind of goes back to your original question, like, what do you say to the person who's already in that in-between zone of, well, this is not my shame, but yet it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't know how to tell them these things without getting into the spiritual, because now you're just asking me to do, like, sheer force of will work. You know, it's like, there's so many people who walk around.
To do.
Yeah. Well, because shame, so many thoughts. But so here's the other thing that the guy told me, well, in the soul care conference, he described shame as having a bent will.
Mm. Okay.
And I was like, ooh, that's strong language. He's basically saying your will is, you know, under the control of another's will.
Mm.
So obviously, if we personify shame doesn't want you to feel good. It doesn't want you to stand upright.
Right.
It wants you to cower and bow. You know, I can't go out to where my roommates are. I have to have a hung head. You know, I have to have an arched back. That sort of, if not physically so, emotionally and mentally, I feel like, oh, I'm below you, or I can't stand up to you. Like, literally, I can't stand, like, physically, but I can't stand up for my beliefs. I don't feel like I'm worthy to talk back, right?
Right.
So to me, you know, if shame, you know, is personified, then what is shame going to do? It's doing its job. It's like, hey, I'm here to make you feel like garbage.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want you to get free. I don't want to uninterlock from you. You know, I don't want you to have a sheer force of will that overcomes me. My will is to force your will to do what I want it to do. So I can't talk to people and just be like, hey man, just try harder. You know, just get over your insecurities. Hey, just smile. I mean, that's why I love philosophy, because it really makes you work and dig into the dirt with these tools, because just telling someone to get better doesn't work. Just, hey, you know how you were traumatized and you were shamed? Just try harder.
Right.
I mean, you don't think they've tried that already?
Right.
You don't think they tried to overcome the internal insecurities and thoughts and barrage of emotional attacks that happened there? You don't think that they've tried to stand up to the shame inside or stand up for themselves? So for me, like, the spiritual dimension has to come in, because obviously there's something deeper at work that is wanting to prevent you from overcoming the uninterlocking of those two identities.
That's deep, and that's a heavy thing, a very, very heavy thing. And like you said, sheer will, I don't care how willful you are. Sheer will is not doing it, because when you're speaking of shame, you're speaking of an energetic field. You're speaking of frequency. You're speaking of an actual spirit. And so you can't remove that off of yourself without fighting fire with fire, so to speak, fighting spirit with spirit. You have to.
And then you got to be mindful who's around you in your circle and your spiritual influence as you're dealing with those aspects of shame, those different aspects of shame.
But it's deep when you say that, because the people that you are predominantly around feed and foster and manifest that level of shame. You're not around certain people that don't do that. So much like Bernard said, it doesn't want to leave. It doesn't want to, disperse from you. So you now are cultivating an environment, whether it's people, habits.
Because your friends are doing it too.
Correct.
They're living with their own shame.
Yes. You're cultivating an environment of those who are going to continue to encourage that level of shame. And when you are around those who are higher vibrational, who do the work, who are trying to come out of their shame or have, slowly come out of their shame, it's almost as if you would be uncomfortable because you're not used to that. You're used to being around people who are helping you to cultivate the frequency that you're in currently, which is being in shame. So you're not really going to be around people that are being like, hey, hold your head up, or how are you? Or it's almost like someone saying, when you do make a comment, oh, that was a really profound comment, or you're very smart, or just makes a comment to you of affirmation, it's almost like, who are you? Get away. Because you're used to, people, places, things, habits that enforce you staying in that level of shame.
And one thing I noticed too, with COVID, it caused us, my daughter and I, to reset ourselves, and to look at our environment, those around us, and to get rid of those things that no longer serves us, and that included some people, because some people will keep you in bondage, financially, spiritually, emotionally. So we just noticed that a lot of people in our circle have reset themselves, so have you noticed that as well, Bernard, and people that you've been speaking to about, your circle? Are they resetting themselves, or what about you?
Well, my lifestyle was pretty quarantined even before the quarantine, because I'm very introverted. So I had no problem just staying in the house. But I did talk to one of my students. We had a philosophy club on Zoom during last school year, and this one girl, she seemed that I had never met her before, but from the conversations we had on the club, she just seemed to be like, this pandemic has changed me, and I really I can't be the person I used to be, and some of my friends don't understand why I'm the way I am now, but I just have to do this. I cannot be the old person. Right. So it was just kind of striking to hear that sort of visceral, change in her life, even though I had never met her.
Wow. Yeah, it's a reset. It's a reset.
Because you don't have those things to foster good, bad, ugly. It's kind of like you're just by yourself. And especially, like you said, Bernard, if you're introverted, you don't, really fool with people as is already. You're kind of always by yourself. So anything that comes in is just like extra stimuli to, kind of push you over to one edge versus another, And so, especially in dealing with, not being around people for so long, you don't have a cheerleader, good or bad.
Right.
It kind of helps you to scratch everything off the board and start fresh. Right. Because even sometimes, when we were in the house and it was time for us to go outside, even something as simple as getting dressed, I'm like, who am I? What am I going to put on today? Or when people talk to me, I hadn't kind of spoken in a public setting in so long. My greeting was weird, and I didn't make eye contact. It was just off because it had been so long. But in that, I have discovered so many things about myself, so many things about what I guess once thought it was important, that is no longer important. And like we kind of spoke about last session, the value that you put on yourself and other people.
Right.
Because I am so fragile, so to speak. But it's I'm fragile, but I'm very strong now. I'm fragile, but my boundaries are more set. So when I'm speaking to someone, I'm versus at first kind of speaking to them to make conversation, I'm now speaking to them and thinking in the back of my head, do you add value? Is this somebody that, I would want to continue conversations with? Right. Is it even worth us exchanging contact information? Because I'm not so free with the energy that I display or the energy that I receive nowadays because of the work that I've been doing.
Right.
Yeah. I want to kind of go back a few minutes to what you guys were talking about with the, being surrounded by certain people. So I came up with these, I'm always doing diagrams, the philosophical diagrams. So, and I was teaching this workshop about creativity and identity. I had this, at the bottom of the page was what I call the pool of mediocrity. And then at the top is the high dive of excellence. So in the pool of mediocrity, you have people hey man, just stay down here. This is easy. It's just, we just, swirl around in this pool of mediocrity, and there's a lot of people there. But then the high dive of excellence, you got to climb up 30, 40, 50 feet, and you're lonely. You're the only one up there. And so this relates to what you guys. That's sort of a framework to what you guys are talking about with the shame.
Mm-hmm.
Shame becomes it's almost like a point of connection, right?
Uh-huh.
If everyone around you is sort of in the mediocrity pool or the pool of shame, it becomes easier to just accept, like, well, hey, we're all down here in the pool of shame.
Right.
So why would you climb out and make us look bad? And it's really not you trying to make them look bad. You're just like, man, I'm tired of being in this pool of shame.
Right.
I want to climb out to the high dive of I want to go where my life, is of excellence and value and significance, and I want to go up there, and it's going to take work, but I'm going to do it.
Right.
But if other people see you doing it, they all of a sudden get convicted because they're like, oh, well, this person wasn't that much better than me. So if they can do it, that must mean I could also probably do it. Oh, that's going to take a lot of work, though. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull them down. Hey, man, what you doing? Look, that looks really high up there. That looks like a lot of work. You should probably just come on down. Come on, man, you're going to end up back down here anyway. So it becomes,
that's the thing.
And that's profound right there. You doing all that, you're gonna end up back down here anyway.
Right. Why waste your time?
So,
stay with us.
But it becomes difficult to talk to others about shame, like you said, if they're not on the same wavelength or frequency, because they have identified with the shame.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They have become one with the shame,
right.
And everyone around them is doing the same thing to validate it. So I see this as like, you have God's kingdom, and then you have, the devil's kingdom. All he does is reverse what God is doing. So it's a type of community.
Right.
But it's a false community. It's like, hey, let's all commune and unify over this false sense of self. And then it actually becomes celebrated. Like you see now in culture where they have the walk of shame. Like, it's time to take that walk of shame, right? Like, shame becomes glorified because it's like, hey, we're all in this. We're all the same. We all come from the same, quote-unquote, God, so to speak. So let's celebrate this thing that we are. Whereas, like the Christian community is like, no, we're supposed to celebrate our cleanliness, our Christ-likeness. Let's celebrate our cleanness, our righteousness, not our shame. Like, we're not supposed to celebrate the opposite of who we are. We're supposed to celebrate who we're truly supposed to be.
That's very true. And especially in this society, with that analogy you use, it's like, oh, that's your level of shame? Oh, I could get down and dirtier than that. Like, my shame can be, it's like levels of shame. Everybody wants to do the worst, the most shameful thing. You know what I'm saying? That's,
right.
I can top your shame. But in saying that,
But let me say this too. Some people are so shameful, they say they have no shame. They're so perfect. They're so perfect. They have no issues. And those are the ones that's dirty.
No, but I don't think it's like being perfect. I think they're saying, I'm so settled and okay and rooted in this shame that I don't care. And you really do. But before you making that statement, you care.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is sometimes people have these issues and flaws. And just like, for example, a politician, you got dirt underground, but you hoping none of that dirt show up. So you're like, I'm against this, I'm against this, I'm against that. So then when the media start uncovering stuff, you doing all those things.
Yeah, that shame is like, it's like fungus. You can't get away from it. At that point, you got gangrene, and now you got to cut the whole leg off. Like, you can't get around that. Shame, that is one thing that definitely is going to rear its head. And if you don't let it out, it's just going to show in your personality, how you commune with others, your relationships, just other things.
Mm-hmm.
But so, Bernard, with knowing what shame is and identifying shame, what would you consider, what's the opposite of shame? What's the the direct opposite of shame?
Right. Okay. So I got kind of two answers, but I'll merge them together. So the first short answer would be self-worth, worthiness.
Okay.
Because that's obviously connected to what I said at the beginning, where the guy said, it seems like you don't feel worthy to be in someone's presence. But let's think about what shame says. It says, I'm not good enough, or I am not enough. And And so worthy would be obviously the opposite. It's like, hey, if you were to, well, let's put it in this analogy. If you went into a high-priced restaurant and you were wearing, mud-covered clothes, even if you knew you were rich, just everyone looking at you makes you feel like, oh, they don't think I belong here. Like you couldn't sit down comfortably.
Right.
You would just be thinking about how dirty you looked and how dirty you. So there's something about when you don't feel clean and you don't feel worthy, you don't feel like you're accepted. You don't feel like you belong, like you have the right to be there. You don't have that sort of confident, that's right, give me a table. Put me at the best table. Bring my normal order.
Right.
But when you feel like you're clean, like in the Bible, Christ's righteousness, white linen, when you feel clean, you walk into the restaurant, you're like, snapping your finger, bring me my food, and where's my table? And give me the best, like you deserve it, right? You you have this confident expectation that stuff should be brought to you, they should be treated with a certain manner. I mean, think about that even. When you walk into a restaurant and you got money, they better bring you the best food
right.
or the best service. You expect to be served. You have a sort of, I don't want to say entitlement, but you have a sort of confident expectation of a proper level of deserving something. So when you feel self-worthy, your confidence level goes up about what should come to you. When you don't have that worthiness, you accept whatever they bring to you. Someone who has no self-worth, here, you want this hamburger that fell on the floor? Is that all you got? Yep, okay, I'll take it. So you could translate that to relationships. If you walk into a relationship and you don't feel worthy, if someone's like, well, I don't really want to be with you and just you alone when I want to be with all these other people too, you'll be like, oh, okay. That's,
you can work that out.
Okay, sure. You'll give me some of your time. Okay, I'll take that. But no, when you know yourself and you know what you're worth, you're like, nah, I'm good. You can go ahead.
Right.
Like, I'll wait. I'll wait till the thing that I want comes along because I know I'm worth it.
Right.
Like, I know I'm deserving. So that's part one. So now part two, like I say, I always got to link it to the spiritual, to Christ, to the truth, because there are people on this earth who have that confidence. Like, oh, I know this man better treat me right, or I know I deserve this kind of. So some people do have that sort of self-deserving expectation. But again, like I said, it's really based upon probably other false things like, oh, because I have money, or because I came from this family, or because I have this job. Like, all the stuff is based upon created man-based things that are ultimately can fall. What happens when you lose your job then? Does that mean you're not worth it anymore? What happens when your family is no longer considered royalty? Do you no longer deserve things? So if your worth is based upon things that are always shifting, or even when people say, oh, my net worth, I never understood this. My net worth is $5 billion. I'm like, so when your net worth goes down to $4 billion, does that mean your worth goes down?
Right.
Like, you're not as worthy? Your worth fluctuates every day. So, to me, so self-worth is the first part, but ultimately that self-worth has to be connected to the ultimate version of self-worth, which is like, I'm so worthy that God himself died on my behalf. Like, he saw me as worth dying for.
Yeah.
Until you get that sort of injected into your soul and conscious and being and spirit and frequencies, you will never feel truly worthy, because you're only going to be feeling worthy based upon these, materialistic things. But if you find a person who's like, nah, I mean, God, who literally created everything, said I was worth it, then it's not like you won't feel rejection. It's not like you won't feel pain, but your core self says, wait, oh, you rejected me? Okay, cool. That's all right. I'm still seen as worthy by the only person who really matters. Right? Like, the only person whose opinion truly matters still finds me worthy. And since his opinion of you never changes, your worth can never change.
And that's why it's really important, going back to what you said about a person's net worth. Because when people lose that, for example, someone would say, so Bernard, who are you? You start talking about your title, your position, what you have, where you live. People get caught up in that. And like you said, if they were to lose all of that, that's why some people want to kill themselves. because that cape they put on, that was their identifier. You know, they don't feel like anything without that. And then going back to what you said about the restaurant, it's funny how when a person, like you said, have all this money, why is it they have to drive up in the front with a BMW, Ferrari, whatever. They have to be suited and booted and Gucci and all that kind of stuff. But you have this money, you don't have to prove all these things. But it seems like the more, I guess, worthless they feel, the more people put on. You know, I'm noticing that. I'm really noticing that because, like you said,
what putting sugar on shit.
Right. Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm just saying.
Yeah, because
you're not whole inside. You're trash inside. You can't even connect. So it's just like, I'm gonna dress this up. I'm gonna put whatever. I'm gonna be the loudest. You know what I mean? I'm gonna have the most flashiest car. I'm gonna have the nice person on my arm. I'm gonna do these things because really, if you uncover these things, I do not have a core. Like I am nothing inside, or I am rotten inside. So it is. I know you don't. That's not like a harsh cuss word, but I'm just saying like that's what it is. It's like sprinkling sugar over it. You still kind of smell it. You still kind of looking like that don't look right. You know what I'm saying? But it's just it's not an authentic representation of who you are because like you guys said, once it's stripped away, then you have nothing. And then even that, I never understood. So what is the definition of, what is it? Your worth?
Net worth.
Your net worth. So what is that? Like the combination of your possessions, how much you have in the bank, like what is how did they come up with that number anyway? No, I'm just like asking because I never understood like, because I've seen a person be worth like $1 billion, but you're like living like you're not. So like what is how do they come up with that? Like what is that? Is that the perception, or do they actually like legitimately add up your assets and say
it's supposed to be a computation of what's your disposable income, like if something happened right now versus the material stuff that you have overall and the difference between the two.
Oh, okay, I see.
So on paper, you can be worth this on here, but if something go down, the world ends, can you get that stuff immediately to do what you need to do, or do you have to try to
and then
sell
to the
stuff?
perception that someone has a high net worth or that they're wealthy or whatever, combining that with a person having good character. A millionaire does not a good character make. Like that's not, and most oftentimes it's actually the opposite. The more money that you make, it's kind of like, the perception of who you are as a person to me is kind of diminished. And maybe I think that's something that I need to work on. Maybe that's an ism that I have, because when someone is like filthy rich, I kind of look at them as like, you're not such a good person. You know what I'm saying? Like, what is that makes me feel like if a person has a lot of money, that they're not a good person? But I think too, I guess I'm identifying, or I'm pointing out the shame that I think that they have, because when you have a lot of money, because of the life that you live, everybody's like, rags to riches story. I came from this. I got here from this low place. And so when you get to that higher place, you are even more people pleasing than you were before. You're buying people's love and affection. You're doing things that are against your morality, your standards, and what you believe, to keep this stature or keep this persona of yourself in others' eyes. So all of the things that I kind of, how they say a different level, a different demon, all of these things, I guess, that come with the money, I kind of just am like, when someone's filthy rich, I'm kind of like, not a good person. I mean, and that's terrible of me to think that way, but I'm just honest in that I do kind of think that way initially. You know
but
what I mean?
The thing is it because the pattern of some people who have done immoral, illegal, unethical things that you just paint that brush for all of them?
I think that initially, well, now I'm in the vein or understanding that abundance is my birthright. Like, because of whose I am and who I am was created from, you know what I'm saying? I'm supposed to have the best of everything. So, like Bernard said, I'm able to walk into the restaurant regardless of whether I really got $20 and really have to, do a budget meal. But I represent myself as if I have all the money in the world because of whose that I am. You know what I'm saying? And who created me. But I think that when, like you said, the example of the wealthy, the example that they show, the way that they have, it seems like you down for the cause. You know what I'm saying? When you started from the bottom, now we're here. When you coming up, you down for the cause. But when you get to a certain point, at what point do you have so much money that you're no longer empathetic? At what point do you no longer see someone suffering and really are going through it and you don't have any empathy or sympathy for that person? At what point does money make you turn your eyes away from being human? Right. You know what I mean? And I think that there's so many examples of that, and the people that, i.e. from our own hometown, the people that don't operate in that way, i.e. the MC Hammers, i.e. the people that, they have the money and they trying to take care of everybody. You just fall to the bottom real fast. Like, there's no in between. It's like you had the money one day, you don't have it another, because there is really no, and I hate to say it like that, there's just really no good-heartedness in certain levels of money. And the only reason why I say that is because money is a way. First of all, money is a currency. It is a frequency. When I say, because I am God's, you know what I'm saying, my abundance is my birthright, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm saying that I should be filthy rich, money coming out of the ears. I'm not saying that.
Right.
I'm saying that I feel that I should have what I need and the desires of my heart within reason so far as God's will for my life.
Right.
And in between then, God is going to give me glimpses and give me favor and give me things to let me know that I am so loved and adored in his eyes. But that does not mean that I'm going to have the level of money that is going to make me, I guess, turn or make my personality or make the core of who I am decay. And I think that once you got the Steve Jobs money, the Elon Musk money, once you have that level of money, it's like, and I'm not just speaking of just abundance in general, because you can have abundance in anything. I'm speaking of straight up cash, like money. Like, it makes you this person or this thing. There's an energy once you start, going up the ladder in frequency with the levels of money. It makes you this thing. In case in point, I hope don't nobody crucify me on here. I know some of y'all is Oprah lovers. I fool with Oprah, she cool, right? But everybody was like, oh my God, Oprah is so nice. She's so sweet. She got the school for the little African girls. First of all, you don't know what they got going on at that school or what's happening at that school. I'm not saying that she's abusing the children or nothing like that. But you don't really know, number one. And number two, oh, she was so sweet. She gave everybody in the audience a car. First of all, it's like Tyler Perry status. When you're a billionaire or when you got so much money, that lady wasn't being nice. She don't know y'all like that. She needs a buku tax write-off. You know what I'm saying? She has so much money. She earns so much income that she needs to give everyone in the audience a card to just balance her books out to where they're not crucifying her come tax time. So it's just like, not to say that if you cannot have money, you cannot be
nice.
Be nice or kind, a real philanthropist, any of these things.
Right.
I'm not saying that by no shape of the imagination, but as we were going back to our original topic, the shame in which they felt when they were coming up, they will never return there again. I know some people that's like, I don't care what I got to do.
Right.
To keep this level, I will never. And then people like never say never, or the same thing you experience going up. Be careful because you might experience that coming down. I know people that's like, I don't care what I got to do. I will never go back down to the level that I was at, and that is something that they have to deal with in their shame. So I think that it's something that I guess I have just picked up along the way, inherited along the way. One of my isms that I kind of have learned through observation along the way when it comes to not just abundance and wealth, because wealth and abundance can mean so much more than monetary value, can mean so much more than money. I mean, it can mean so much more than money. I think when I say that, I'm speaking of, cash money, like people that have overabundance. I think it was like something I read, and they were kind of like, philosophizing with the point of there should, with what's going on in the world we live today, there should be no billionaires.
Why?
Because the money in which you would receive being a billionaire, if you were to give that money away, you would still be like a millionaire. Like how you're still living.
So how much more money do you need?
You're still living like the people that own Walmart and other corporations. How much money? It's like morally wrong.
So
like
are they living in shame? Is that why you think some of this is happening, or is it your perspective of shame?
They're definitely not living in shame to me. If they did live in shame, it's the shame of like, okay, so this is another thing that, so people that have, an abundance of financial wealth, it kind of irritates me when they try to relate to others that don't have it. Because the way in which they talk to or try to relate to the people that don't have it, it's like they feel the shame, right? They're like, I'm filthy rich, right? So you're going to a school talking to kids, or you're going to a foundation that you're giving, some money away or whatever. But it's just like, oh, I feel so sorry that you guys are in this situation. Like, it's like... how they talk to, I just can't even describe it. I think their shame is like they feel that they have so much money, so they kind of got to dummy down who they are to speak to someone, I guess, to try to relate. But you have so much money now that you can't, it's kind of unrelatable. Like you can't relate. It's almost like, you ever, and I don't know if you guys have ever done this, and this might be slightly getting off the topic, but have you ever, you guys like volunteered at a homeless shelter, right? And you're like, I'm about to volunteer at the homeless shelter. I'm down here, I'm in the trenches, I'm for the cause, I'm with these people. Until somebody try to shake your hand. Okay. You know what I'm saying? Like the moment that they come in and shake your hand, you're kind of less down. You're like, I'm here to help, but I wasn't trying to touch you, though.
So you weren't trying to do the humanity part as far as touch, but you were okay doing the action to represent the humanity part.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. So how can you be there to represent the people if I can't touch you?
Right.
I'm not saying I want a hug. I just came to shake your hand. Thank you so much for being here. And you looking at the person's hand like, not so much.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like you can't, that's not, and so I guess with that example, I guess that's what I mean by when you have so much money. You feel the shame to, oh, I gotta get in these trenches, I gotta help others, I gotta be about philanthropy. You know what I mean? When maybe it just might be about taxes, but I gotta be about philanthropy, I gotta help other people. But when it comes to getting down personally, looking people in their eyes, talking to people, vibing with people, that part you just can't bring yourself to do.
Right. Yeah.
I think, and that's and it is a bias, because everybody that has money is not like that. But that's just my feeling of it. And almost like a Elon Musk. Do you notice, like, when people become more and more wealthy, the more eccentric, like the more odd, the more you know what I mean? It's like you kind of like a robot, not a robotic, but just your perception or the way that you relate to others. It's just very, very different. You know? Right. So yeah, I guess we kind of went off topic. That was just that was in my soul.
Okay, reset the room.
Okay. So we're going to reset the room, everybody. Thank y'all so much for tapping in and participating on 6 Saturdays. We are currently right now on Clubhouse and on Facebook. Those of you guys who are on Facebook, we are in Vernita in Jabez's room. Please come down to Clubhouse. We would love to talk to you guys. Last week we talked about the elephant in the room, and this week we're talking about the deep topic of shame. And it is so deep that, you know, there are just so many layers of this. We would love to hear your opinion. We would love to hear your view and what you guys have to say. We have a special guest on today with us, Bernard Hankins, which is a philosopher, a creative, a free thinker, just an awesome all-around guy. And he also is a Christian, I might add. So please just come on over to Clubhouse so we can hear your voice, we can commune with you, and you can be a part of the conversation this Speaking in Colors Saturday. Bernard, what were you going to say before I reset the room?
Yeah, so I mean, as a philosopher and a creative person, you know, I really don't believe in the idea of tangents or nothing is connected. I think that's just, you know, the way, especially in America, people have been taught to only be like, oh, well, this is only one way. It's like, no, everything is connected. It's just that, you know, and I see in the school system, kids aren't taught to think, you know, more, connect the dots. Yeah. You know, it's just kind of linear. So what you're saying about money, I guess I would connect it to shame. You know, what you're saying there, there's levels of shame of like, oh man, I got so much money. I mean, cool, because the most obvious example we know in America is like, ooh, slavery. Okay, how can we pay for all this shame? You know, that's what everybody's trying to do now. Yeah. Ooh, okay, we'll donate all this money and we'll create all these programs. Like, okay, that's not going to fix it. You need to, like you're saying, you need to address the humanity part of it. You know, there's all these programs and donations, and everybody thinks we're doing such a good job. I'm like, you're not doing anything. Right. You are putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. Right. You are saying we know that you've been shot, but we just know how to like put a money Band-Aid on this. Right. So I think if you take I guess my mind will start here. To me, it's all about order. That's why I say I love philosophy. So when I think about what you're saying, I would start with the most important aspect of our humanity is our spiritual selves. Then I guess you could go to the mental, emotional, soul, and then your body. I mean, they're really all important, but in the current situation we're in this existence, we need more spiritual nourishment than we need physical and emotional because we got physical. That's easy. It's like, you know how to eat, right? You know how to get food. What most people don't know how to get is how to nourish those wounds and the shame we're talking about. So what happens is the order has been messed up. We should be feeding our spirit with spiritual food. You know, you can't live by bread alone, but every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. So you need to eat. And you can't address spiritual, emotional, mental debt with physical currency.
Mm-hmm.
They have to match. So what I hear, to connect with all the stuff you're talking about money, I don't think it's unrelated. I see it as the same thing when Jesus, like, you can't serve two gods. You can't have mammon and God. Like, you can't swap those two, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't fix shame with money.
Yeah.
It's a different type of value. That's why I always say there's a hierarchy. There's money, currency, and then value.
Mm-hmm.
Value is the highest of those. Currency, there's all types of, like you're saying, there's all types of currency. It doesn't have to be money. It could be time, it could be affection, it could be emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And then money is at the bottom. Like, money is a type of currency.
Mm-hmm.
Currency is a type of value. But what we're all looking for is to know we're valuable. Or, like I said, worthy. So if you look at humans and they have shame and they say to myself, oh, I know how I'll fix this. I'll send some kids to college, or I'll start a foundation. I'll give away all my billions. You can feel some sense of fulfillment. I'm not saying those are wrong or bad. I mean, you will feel good. Like, hey, I did some stuff for other people, and look, I changed the world, and I did big things.
Mm-hmm.
But you're ultimately still going to have that wound because you're not, like I said, you're not connecting the two things of the same type. It's like trying to eat food when you need food for thought. It's like your body is hungry, but you're like, I'll read a book. Like, you can't do the opposite things. Shame is it's not a physical thing only. Yeah, you can feel shame for how your body looks, your skin color, your clothes, your shoes, but shame runs deep. That's what we're talking about. It's connected to the core of your identity, of your person. You're told you are not good enough. You, your person, your identity, put your name in that blanks. Bernard is not enough, or Michael's not, whoever. That's what shame tells you.
Mm-hmm.
So shame attacks the core of your awareness, your self-awareness, your consciousness, your relationships. It attacks you and attaches itself to you. So what I was thinking when you were talking about the money and the shame was about this idea of a person. You were mentioning Oprah, and I'm sure there's other people like Oprah where they've probably, I've heard, some of her stories. She's probably, some of the stuff that's happened to her, she's definitely experienced shame.
Right.
And I'm not saying this is why she's doing that, but I can imagine someone who feels a lot of shame also feels helpless and powerless. And so then how have we been told to feel powerful in this world? Well, get money. Money is the almighty dollar. We call it the almighty dollar. When you see other people using money to get what they want or control the world, you go, oh, that's what I need to do. Nobody listens to my voice. I know what I'll do. If I put $100,000 down, I bet they'll listen.
Right.
I bet you if I get this gun, they'll listen.
Right.
Like, people find ways to get control, but again, it's only physical. So you're going to feel that sense of power for a while, but that thing is still going to nag you. I remember, Donnie McClurkin, he was saying, he was like, he was singing to Oprah one time, and she was crying or something, and he said he knows that she goes to all these different religions and these different spiritual, Soul Sundays, and he said he told her to sing, it's not Krishna, it's not Allah, it's not Buddha, it's Christ. He said, I'm trying to point you to the truth. So the thing is, with the money and the shame, there's this thing we've been told that money gives you, or what do people call it? They call it FU money. Like, what's your FU money? It's like, that's the amount of money you would tell your boss, FU, right?
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of people think, once I get this amount of money, I can say, F my boss, F the world, I'm quitting my job, I'm off on an island. That's what everybody wants to do. Get enough money so I don't have to care what people think.
Right.
So that's what people are trying to get to. They're trying to get to the point where they don't care about your opinion. So they're doing all of this roundabout work to get to the thing which I was talking about earlier. If you came to that conclusion through the truth of who God made you to be, he's like, you shouldn't care what people think about you to start, because I made you. He said, what did Jesus say? He said, don't fear the person who can destroy your body. He said, fear who can destroy your body and soul in hell. Like, if you're going to fear anybody, fear God. Fear the person who could actually do something. You're going to fear human beings?
Right.
So the shame and the money have become intertwined. Mm-hmm. People think that money is the antidote, the thing that cures shame. And it's interesting, on 9/11, I think I saw the movie before. I must have fell asleep because that was what I was watching. I was like, I've seen this before. So this movie on Netflix called Worth. And it's about the lawyer. Did you watch it?
Yes. Okay, go on. Oh, my God.
Yeah, yes. So, the lawyer who was put in charge to determine the worth of a human being who was killed during 9/11 mm-hmm. and all the stuff he had to go through, because all the families were like, oh, so you're saying that my, janitor's son is not worth as much as the CEO from, whatever bank. So that is the problem right there, that people actually believe that human beings' lives has a monetary value. That's the number one problem. Like we were talking about self-worth. The fact that you look at your life and say, oh, yeah, put a dollar amount on that. And that's how he started the movie. He said, this is not a philosophical question. He's like, this is a law question. Right. There will be a number.
Right.
But that absolutely makes no sense, because I know if I went to a court hearing where a woman lost her son in a drunk driving accident and I said, hey, here's $60 million. Is that good to cover your son? She's not going to be like, oh, yeah, of course. No person who actually loves their spouse or child or, boyfriend or girlfriend is like, oh, yeah, $60 million, that'll cover it.
That's enough.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that we are intrinsically worthy. Everyone knows that our worth goes beyond this life. It's transcendent. So this goes back to your earlier question, Nikita, about what's the opposite of shame. I think it goes back to the very beginning, where it's like, hey, man is made in God's image. He's like, there's your worth right there. Mm-hmm. The fact that you're created like God, similar to God, that you're supposed to have God's glory and not shame. Like when you realize, oh wait, I'm supposed to represent and reflect this amazing, beautiful, creative, intelligent being, and I'm similar. I came from the same DNA. Mm-hmm. That's where your worth is.
Right.
That's where the sense of shame gets eradicated, because like you were saying, the farther you get away from that knowledge, you start to feel worse. But the closer you get to that knowledge, you start to be like, wait a minute, why am I even thinking about all this other stuff? This stuff is lies. So I think a lot of the problem is just this entanglement of money and like intangible values.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna and I'm gonna mention something that someone Wendell in the comments mentioned, but keep in mind I'm gonna ask a question after regarding spirit and the correlation with money in the reverse, because I always like to look at both sides of the coin. But here on Facebook, Wendell comment, I'm told that money makes the person, the true person, the real person come out. And it says, people don't only think that money cures shame, but money allows a person to insulate themselves from others so that they don't have to deal with the other opinions that might perpetuate their shame.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that's really deep in itself, because it's like you almost want to hide from it so it doesn't, exacerbate or bring to light, more to light, the shame that you already feel. So that's deep. But when it says to bring out who the person is, I think what's so funny is, I think you are who you are, right? But I think as you accumulate the money, or accumulate...
You show your butt more.
You do the things that you've been wanting to do.
Right. You show your butt more.
You say the things that you've been wanting to say, Because it's just like everything is correlated with money, or the lack thereof, you know what I mean? So now that you have it, you have less shame. And being like, you got some like inner shame things, but you have less shame to be like, you don't have as much money as I do, so I don't care.
Like Bernard said, the F you money. So you saying it to other people, and not so much your boss.
Right.
So I don't have to deal with you now. I dealt with you in a relationship. Yeah, we were husband and wife, but I was just doing this for the moment. This is not working for me. Okay,
so let's flip the other side of that coin. And so we were talking about the shame as it regards to quote unquote high value. I hate that word now, by the way. High value is just. I actually was just real bitter that I just said that high value. I'm so over it, but
Tell them why. Tell them why.
First of all, okay. Well, this is
Don't
okay.
lose your train of thought, though.
Yeah, I'm not. Okay, so just a quick thing. So, okay, first I was online. I'm a YouTuber. I like watching YouTubes, whatever have you. And Kevin Samuels is on there. It's his opinion, but it's just like you was a loser, and now you got a little bread up under you, and so now you have all this opinion about what's a high value man and whatever. So then I was introduced to Clubhouse. Initially, I was like, oh man, I can't get on Clubhouse because I didn't have an iPhone or whatever. So then they opened it up, and I was like, yay, I'm finally able to get on Clubhouse. And so I think I briefly talked to Bernard about this too. So I got on Clubhouse, and I was really excited, and I was just like, okay, well, let's see what's going on. And all the chats that I went into were like, you're not a high value woman. You're not a high value man. If you don't do this, and you don't have this, and if you ain't getting up at 4:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, you are not high value. And high value. And I'm like, who made up this high value trash? Like,
yep.
High value is predicated on the person who is speaking of the thing. What is high value to you might not be what's high value to me. High value to me might be a mate that loves me to death. Well, to life.
Right.
Love me to life. Loves me to life. I'm not a cooker. You cook for me. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
We both work. We bring stuff to the table. You cook, I clean up. We laugh. To me, that might be high value than this notion that you have to be like this dogmatic money-making machine, and you it's okay to be rude to other people and to not value other people's opinion, all under the umbrella of being high value. I just was so over it. It kind of turned me off from Clubhouse, but I was like, you know what? No, it's stuff that I need to do on here, and so I was able to come on here and have an excellent conversation. End up meeting Bernard that day on the live or whatever. So I'm glad that I didn't let it shun me, but I just have a distaste now for every time like I hear somebody say high value, my ears just turn off. Like I'm not even
They bleed, huh?
Yeah, like right, my ears are bleeding.
Okay.
But so basically, we're looking at the opposite end of the coin. And so we were speaking of basically how money, being correlated to having an overabundance of, financial currency, right? So let's talk about the notion that, and we're speaking of self-worth. And I'll just tell you a quick, also, is because, so I stayed in California before I moved out here to Georgia. I was a high value woman. I was just joking. I made, over at least $100,000 a year. But in California, that's not much money. You know what I mean? But I was doing very well on my businesses, always recreating myself, always just getting it in and doing the work. I'll say that. And so, Spirit, God, it just told me, like, you got to go. You got to leave. This is no longer feeding your spirit. Yes, financially, you are having everything that you want, need, and desire. But at the same time, you are not flourishing. You are not growing. You are not, elevating and ascending in the ways that I want you to elevate and ascend in your spirit, so far as your spirit man. Like you were saying, the spirit food, feeding yourself spiritually. It's not going. So hold on one moment. You said do what?
Switch it.
Oh, okay. Give me one moment. Let me switch this. Let me turn this camera because we need to plug in the charger. So my spirit man wasn't being fed, and I was like, it's really important to me that I feed that more. I can have a whole lot of money and still be spiritually empty. So in that, I end up moving down to Georgia. Now it's crazy because financially, I might not be, making as much money, or it might not be as lucrative because my perspective has changed so far as clientele and things of that nature. But spiritually, mentally, I am just so much more whole than I have ever been. And financially, it might not look like that, but spiritually, I am well. Spiritually, I am sound. Spiritually, I have just developed and ascended past what I was able to do when I was just looking at monetary things. So in that, I really had to go through a dark night of a soul of sorts, because I really had to shed away all of those things that I developed or thought was true about myself, work through my levels of shame, and work through what was acceptable to me or not acceptable at that time, and really just had to see, is this okay? And I can say that, yes, I am more sound, I am more whole, I am more well in this situation. So I say all that to say, when we're speaking of the opposite end of the coin, what is your opinion, Bernard, or Mom? What is you guys' opinion on the correlation with woke and broke?
That sounds like a book.
Right. But, and what is your correlation with that? Because I am noticing that, and I guess it's a frequency thing, an energetic thing. But what is your correlation on that? Because I noticed that when you're going of the things of the spirit, when you're tapping into those things, you're not so much keeping a schedule so far as, quote unquote, what is high value or what's making you the most money. You're doing what you need to do to make sure that you are spiritually and mentally sound. You know what I mean? And that you're balanced, right? And your connection is with spirit first, and trusting that all those other things will fall in line. But most oftentimes I kind of notice that when that is the case, then you're not like really rolling in the dough. So what is you guys' opinion on that level of, the shame that comes with that, and that level of self-worth? What is your opinion so far as, just the correlation between those two, woke and broke? And for those of you guys who are on Facebook, please tap into Clubhouse, because I would love to hear your actual voices on this, your opinion on this topic. So go ahead, Bernard.
Okay. Yeah. So while you're talking, so I'll tie this into shame, which is the overall theme, and then like we've been talking about identity. So everybody's put on this earth to fulfill their unique call, and everybody's unique call is set apart. So I have this whole poem. If you look at my Clubhouse bio, you go watch it. It's called God's Hard Drive.
Right.
And it's basically just like you're a file on God's hard drive. You're the only one who's ever existed, ever will exist, and exist as you. So because you are that unique, there's a sort of obligation, for you to do that work. Like, hey, you're the only Bernard that's ever existed. There's not going to be another one, so we kind of need you to be him. Oh, okay. So it's necessary because it's true, but it's also kind of like, hey, it's kind of your job to be the hand. Like the left hand is being the left hand, so we need you to be the right hand. We don't need another left hand. So if you speak to that in the context of, say, like American culture, I think that's why there's so many people just doing the same job. It's like, well, not all y'all are supposed to be doing the same job. Some of y'all are denying your call and your unique sense of self and purpose in life. So I think shame comes from there, because that's okay. So here's another way I define shame. I think shame is, we all know the shame, like the negative shame. Oh, I wish I shouldn't have done that. That was so wrong. I shouldn't have cheated or stole or killed someone. It's knowing something you shouldn't have done, but you did it anyway. So you feel shame. You keep thinking about it. But I think there's another shame, which is I know I should have done this and become this, but I didn't do that. So if you're sitting in a desk job and that's what you know is not what you're supposed to do, and there's nothing wrong with a desk job if that's your calling. If you're called to be on, financial administrator, a banker, then that's what you're supposed to do. And you can feel the purpose and fulfillment in that. If you are called to start some kind of school for kids, or start a coffee shop, or, follow your dreams as an artist, but you're sitting in a desk and you're sitting there from 9 to 5 and your soul is being crushed, and in the depths of your soul, like, this is not who I am. There's a certain shame that comes with, I know I'm not living up to my ideal person. I know there's a template, a goal that God created for me to become, and I'm not achieving that. I know I was meant to become something special and unique and God ordained, but I have denied that of myself. The trick is, like we were talking about earlier, with all the sort of voices that can affirm you, people will tell you, oh, no, you're doing the right thing, man. You got to feed your family, and it's a job, and that's what you're supposed to do. So, yeah, you're showing up to work. Like, you have other people telling you that it's okay because they're doing it. And that's what everyone's doing. But, no, what did Jesus say? He said the path to destruction is broad. Like, everybody's following that. Cool. Go that way. But the right path is the narrow one. Not a lot of people are doing what they're supposed to. I mean, typically when you read that verse, you think of it as just like moral and immoral. And I think that's true, but I think it could also apply to just, hey, everyone else is doing not what they are supposed to be doing, in terms of vocation even. But those who are really following God are following the least likely path, the path where people are making fun of you. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing starting a clubhouse group? Who do you think you are? You think you're going to be an artist? Who are you to start a business? You're going to invent something, because all of that stuff requires belief in God too. Like, you really think God is going to build that vision for you? So I think the shame there is connected more to your identity. Like I said earlier, you have individuality, then you have sexuality, then you have personality, then you have ethnicity. All of us have an individuality. God's like, yep, that's Bernard. He's supposed to do that. He's the only one. So think about that. If you're denying yourself, there's a level of shame, because God, who made you, is smart enough to make you the way he did, and he doesn't make a mistake. So you're basically saying, hey, God, I think you made a mistake. I'm really supposed to be in this office job. It's like, no, actually, I put that creativity in you to start a child's art academy. But I guess I don't know what I'm doing. So go ahead. Go ahead and do what you're doing. But the other shame is this, and this is why I think it's so powerful, because most people don't think about this. You intuitively know inside yourself that you deserve God's best, right? If you're think about this, God knows he deserves the best. You're made in his image, so you also know you deserve the best. So when you're not allowing yourself the best, you feel even shame of yourself. Like, what am I doing to myself? Like, why am I getting in my own way? Why am I preventing me from giving myself the best? And I think that's immoral in a sense, because you really do deserve it. Not because you deserve it, because God's like, hey, I died for you to have this. I died for you to have this abundant life. This is unjust. In a sense, it's like, it's unjust for you not to have the best. So shame comes from there too, because you know that the sort of justice that should be done towards you is not being done towards you, and it's your fault because you're the one stopping it from yourself.
And one thing I'm thinking about as you were speaking was that how they say a lot of the talents and gifts are in the cemetery, because people did things to survive instead of doing what innately was their gifts and talents, their God-given gifts and talents. And that's the irony of how we're living. And then also, too, like it talks about in the Bible, unless God builds the house, the builder labors in vain. He doesn't want us to stay up late trying to figure it out and then getting up early trying to do that, because all that's in vain, because he wants to get the glory in everything that we're doing. And so the thing is, it's like he gives us this vision and like I said, make the write the vision down, make it plain. But then he wants to do the process to make the results happen, not us worrying about how it's going to happen. He just planted in us on how to, like you said, have the children's school or the children's program or whatever, and then he's going to make that happen. He's going to bring the resources, the people, and all those kind of things. So I think the difference with this broken woke thing is people are just trying to survive and have, and instead of really
the shame of it not looking like everyone else's. Right.
And then the thing is the shame of not having. So for example, like teachers, teachers are giving back. A lot of the teachers are giving back, and they're sacrificing a lot. Mm-hmm. Those teachers can be probably anywhere teaching and really making a lot of money. Mm-hmm. But if they really love children, the learning process, or whatever the purpose they go into that for, they're not making a lot of money. Mm-hmm. They're almost in poverty levels, So the thing is, but the woke is they're living their dream. They're making a difference. They're impacting a child, okay? But on the other side, they have to be broke, in a sense, to do that. So a lot of people don't want to be broke. A lot of people do not want to be broke. So I think that's a lot of that too.
And I don't think it's anyone's desire to be broke. Doesn't feel that being broke, not having money is not the highest vibrational energy that you can have. It's not a force that, keeps you going. There is a certain grit to it, but I think that, I guess not that word is not good because
I don't think people are broke.
It comes from a place of lack. And it's not to necessarily say that you're lacking. You're not lacking. You can be teaching and still have. I guess it's just maybe it doesn't look the same. You don't have as much.
Right. But I don't think it's broke. Broke can be a state of mind.
Well, broke is definitely a state of mind. Because to me, broke is like you had the money several times. Mm-hmm. It's like what you choose to do with it,
Right.
I want to do this or do that. You have a broke mindset versus being poor or in poverty. Poor is just you just don't have it, period.
Because it's just like people winning the lottery, and if their mindset is broken, they lose that money. They said within 3 years. Mm-hmm.
So. Because you have that mentality, so it just slides through your hands. I guess broke is a quick definition or a quick word for meaning lack of good stewardship. Okay. You're not a good steward over your financial wealth or your financial, gain. Right. So yeah, that's deep because I guess I had to figure out, unpack all that and be like, well, who are you? What does that look like? Are you just this stylish or this person that made that amount of money and whatever else? But what are the other things that came with that you didn't necessarily want or desire to have that came with those things and you did not resonate with that? That's almost like the shame being put on you. I don't resonate with some of those things, but it just came with the territory. So when I no longer had that to lean on and I looked at my financial status versus when I guess I was less spiritually in tune, I had to kind of look at that, and really make some decisions about how I'm going to move forward and what is the most important. And now, especially in the climate that's happening now, I would much rather be in alignment and in tune with God's voice and God's will than financials.
Yeah, I think two thoughts that come to my mind. One is, as we're talking about doing the work, like what is the work? So there's obviously like doing the shame work, maybe you got to go to counseling, you got to do whatever, poetry, art, dance, conversations. But then, the Bible talks about renewing your mind. Mm-hmm. Do not be conformed to this world's thinking. And I think that's like the entry. I call it like the gateway scripture. That's like the first scripture that's like, hey, if you don't recognize this scripture, the rest of these scriptures are not going to make sense to you. Because your first foremost thing you need to do is change your mind about the rest of this book you're going to read. Because if you don't, you're going to scoff. You're going to be like, this is stupid. Why would I do this? And why would I do that? It's like, well, because your mind needs to be transformed to a new mind.
Right.
You need to embody the mind of Christ. It says, wait a minute, everybody else is telling me to do this, but this book is telling me to do, I should do this because this is what I'm conforming my mind to. So the first thing is elevating our minds to a new way of thinking, and this is why I always talk about imagination too. Like, imagination is my main topic. It's just like, you have to have imagination, because what happens is, as you were just saying, you know, like, well, I'm caught between this sort of broke and woke mentality. Like, yeah, you don't want to be broke, but you also don't want to be unfulfilled.
Right.
But some people are like, but if you're broke, you're going to be unfulfilled. It's like, well, let's really break that down. If your primary idol or God is money, then of course you're going to feel broke, because you're like, well, the thing that I should have the most of, I have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have a negative, actually. So then there's the shame. It's like, oh man, how come other people have money in their bank account and I never have enough? How come I'm always struggling for money? Whereas if God is your money, you know, your value, and that's the center of your joy and the center of your sense of approval and affirmation and worth, even though you might not have a lot of money, your spirit, your soul, your mind is being fed by the true thing that you're looking for. And you say, well, I don't have a lot of money, but you're not ultimately like broken in your spirit. You don't feel worthless.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't feel like I have no purpose on this earth. People who, like we were saying earlier, people who lose all their job and identity in their work and all, like you saw people during the pandemic, like, what am I supposed to do now? I can't work.
Right.
Like, those people are broke. They are
Right.
broken. Like, I had a friend, she said, you know, these people are spiritually impoverished. I was like, oh, I never thought about putting the two words together.
Wow.
And even one of the word plays I see, you might see on my Instagram, is spear rich you will. There's a rich in the spirit.
Right.
Are you spear rich you will? Do you have spear riches?
Yeah.
So if you focus your mind on the spear riches and you seek out, remember what Jesus said after all? He's like, oh, why do you put your treasure down here? This stuff is going to fade away anyway.
Right.
He's like, put your actual spiritual, put your effort. He's like, get rich, but just put it in the right bank. Like, put it in the eternal bank that's never going to fail.
Right.
So for me, when I'm at school, I know everything I'm doing is paying me dividends. Maybe not on this earth, but I'm like, oh, I put into that kid's life. Oh, I helped change the course of his life. I spoke a word of encouragement. Oh, I deposited hope into him. Oh, I gave him, you know, help. Like, I know all that stuff is stacking bank account. And I'm feeling the fulfillment now, because, like, when I do it, I'm like, yes. Like, I get to tell kids that school sucks and you should, you know, find out who you want to be. Like, yeah, I get to be myself and tell people the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of the shame, it goes back to that false shame. It's like, if a person feels like, man, I'm not making a lot of money and I'm broke and I feel stupid because I'm following this will and everybody thinks I'm dumb. It's like, well, it's still through the lens of shame, because you're measuring one value system using another value system.
Right.
Because I don't have this amount of money, I must be doing the wrong thing.
Right.
But I read this interesting book. It was called The Truth About Work. It was just like sitting on my parents' shelf, and I always look, let me read this book. So this guy, I think he became a millionaire. This book was written in like 1995. He became a millionaire. I think he's a Christian too. And then something happened, he quit his job. He's like, man, I started telling all my friends at the country club and golf course, like, I need to get up out of here. He's like, everybody thought I was crazy. And so he quit all of his businesses. And he said he found himself sitting in like some broken down apartment where a rat was crawling across. But he felt the most fulfilled he ever felt in his life.
Oh, wow.
So me and my wife, you know, we gave away all of our stuff. We got rid of our boats and stuff. And I'm sitting here and I saw this rat and I was like, God, what are you doing to me? But wait a minute, I feel really good. He said, I felt way happier than I did with all that other stuff. It's not that the money wasn't doing anything for him, but now he was actually walking in his actual calling.
Right.
So he felt that internal enrichment.
Yeah. That's deep. That is deep. So we spoke about like so many facets of this, and it's just really important, with the key being having that spiritual connection, and really making sure that you do the work. And so, speaking of the work, give people a couple of things or 3 things that they can do to tune in with that shame, identify it, and, you know, kind of work through, or the process of, you know, working through what they can do to work through that shame to just really become better versions of themselves and be able to show up differently in the world.
Yeah, I mean, so I think, going with the title of our room, identifying shame, I guess I would say, if you want the lowest hanging fruit, it would be, I would actually change that. I would say acknowledging shame, even before you identify it.
Right.
I think that's a problem with a lot of it. Like, we deny.
Yes.
We don't even want to know that it's there.
Right.
We just want to be like, nope, that's not mine. Whatever that is, I'll just push it down.
Yeah.
And I get it, because like I did some work with a counselor, and when I got off the call, I was like, why am I doing this to myself? This is like so much work. Like, I already talked about this story with 3 other counselors, and it's still the same story. And then I was like, man, I can see why people just turn to the substances and drinking and, you know, suppressing, because it's a lot easier just to like not pay attention to it.
Yeah.
But I would say, number one, having the courage to acknowledge shame. Just be like, guess what? I have it. I have it in this area. Maybe you don't even know what it is yet, but at least step one, acknowledging. I would say the next step is have the courage to then really ask yourself, well, okay, maybe that's too quick for some people. I was going to say identify it.
Yeah, identifying and unpacking that thing, that's some work.
Yeah. So definitely acknowledge. I think the next place my mind is going to, the next thing I would say is, I want to speak to this idea of, we talked about this on the phone last week, but maybe this will help people get to the next step. So we talked about there's shame, but then there's being shamed.
Yeah.
And I said, I always wondered why I would hear these news stories about women who had been, you know, victims of sexual assault, and how they didn't want to come forth or be in the courtroom. And I was always confused, because I said, well, you didn't do anything wrong. You were totally the victim. You were totally hurt, violated, whatever. Like, why would you be ashamed for something that wasn't your fault?
Right.
And then I realized, I said, oh, okay. It's the same as if, you know, if somebody pulled you down in a mud puddle with them and you're walking down the street, like, nobody knows, like, oh, someone pulled you down. They just see you as, oh, you're dirty. So you, even though you didn't bring the dirt upon yourself, you still have the appearance of being dirty to people. So you still feel the effects of, oh man, I must be dirty. Look how they're thinking of. So I think maybe the next step would be like, okay, can you, after acknowledging shame, can you start to say, okay, this belongs to me, this doesn't belong to me? That, like, that we talked about at the beginning, uninterlocking your fingers from the other person. And that can be hard, because I think that's what shame does. Like, when it, like the venom suit, like when it leaps on you, it's like, nah, this is you. This is yours. You know, you and I are the same. So I think maybe a small step could be like, hey, this belongs to that person. And maybe do like a chart. Like, I'm big on that, you know, because the problem is when you just talk about the stuff and just think, like, you just get lost in your head. So you have to do some kind of artistic exercise. I don't care if it's a picture,
some type of
shape,
expressive,
you know, fabric, like whatever you use. It could be anything. It could be a pen and paper. It could be a voice note. It could be a story. And I think the art, I would say art is like an anesthesia. It's a way to kind of put you under the anesthesia of, you know, surgery, so you can deal with it. Because if you just try to approach your shame head on, shame is like, nah, okay, I'm gonna punch you right in the face. You know?
Right.
But if you, it's very. Here, I'll give you an example. Like, maybe you've ever been. Me and a friend, we did this. It was hilarious. Me and him used to have these just like weekly conversations, and we'd be referring to these, you know, different girls who we were interested in. But for whatever reason, he didn't want to say the girl's name, and I didn't want to say the girl's name. So we started calling them by the states they were from. So I was like, yeah, you know, South Carolina. I was like, yeah, South Carolina this week. She wasn't showing me any attention. And he was like, yeah, India. Yeah, she was, yeah, I don't know what's going on with India. So we could talk very openly about what it was without giving ourselves away. So you have to do this sort of third-person approach or this sort of sideways approach. You got to tell a story from someone else's point of view. I mean, I'm a very creative person. I don't know if some people would be comfortable with this, but the website Fiverr, where you pay people money and they draw stuff for you or do graphic design on the website. You can say, hey, turn this into a story. Put it in third person. Like, write a story. Have someone else write a story, a song, something that's not first person. And I think that gives you a friend same friend who said them spiritually powers, they call it aesthetic distance. It's like the art gives you that distance between you and the pain or the shame to be able to deal with it, because you're not embracing it. You're like, no, I'm looking through a lens. I'm looking through a movie screen, a film script. I'm listening. This is not the fullness. It's the anesthesia. So that would be step number 2. And step number 3, I would say, goes to identity, which I always refer to. I think, for me, this is where you get into the deeper work. You really got to start to then say, okay, well, like you were saying, Nikki, like, well, who am I then? Right? Like, if I'm not shame and I'm not the things that were done to me, then what am I actually? So if you want the practical steps to that, I always start with talent. I think things that people are really talented in are a type of self-worth. It's not your full self-worth, but it's something to easily grab onto.
Right.
When you feel really good about, man, I can cook well, or I can draw well, or I'm a good listener, that at least gives you a sort of shape, a form to be like, okay, this is part of who I am. This is part of who I was made to be. Because the tricky thing is, it's like, Jesus was like, hey, if you cast out all these demons and then you don't replace it, they're just going to come back even stronger and take you again. So there's this idea that if you don't fill the space with some kind of identity, you're going to just be left with an open void, and then something else is going to fill it.
Right.
You have to fill it with something new. You can't have absence. So if you're going to start to unentangle yourself from shame, the shame is going to want to come back. It's going to be like, hey, remember me? Remember old familiar friends we were? Remember how we used to, hang out, and I told you how horrible you were? It's like if you get rid of a friend, you got to fill that space with a new friend. It's like, now I'm hanging out with somebody new now.
Right.
Okay? I'm hanging out with somebody new, so if you come knocking on my door, there's no table setting for you.
Right.
You're done.
Right.
So you can't just unentangle yourself from shame. You have to also start to identify who you are.
And that is the key, I think, with this whole shame thing, and we definitely will continue to come back and address this, because there's so many different variables and factors when it comes to dealing with shame. But that is the main thing that you need to do, is to identify. Once you're able to identify and point it out, and like he also said, to see what's yours and what's not, what part you played, what part you didn't, what responsibility is yours and what is not, you're able to kind of deal with that in a better way and kind of start the process of working through some of these things and really just figuring out what that is. So I do appreciate you, Bernard. I thank you so much for participating. When I tell you, he was just like gung-ho. I thought, after I went to his Instagram, I was like, oh, he deep. Like, oh, he done did a TED Talk and everything. Okay. Like, I was like, I don't even know if he's going to respond. But no, he responded. We had a conversation. It was very nice and organic, was very willing to participate. And I just really appreciate that, because someone who is a deep thinker, a philosopher, a Christian, just so many of these good attributes, I just appreciate that you saw value in what we were doing here to add your value to it. So I really do appreciate you for that. I appreciate all those who are able to tap in with us on Facebook. We appreciate you for your comments. Please like the pages. Please share with other people. The live that you saw here today, we will continue to have this live every Saturday. It'll be at different times, but majority, Mom, because it's a majority in the late afternoon and evening. So I do appreciate you guys. We will be on Clubhouse on a regular basis, as I just felt like it was a great turnout, and we really want to just kind of flex our muscles so far as just getting used to these different platforms and bringing some more high value content to Clubhouse. And so I just thank you. And then we originated this Saturday, this Speaking in Color Saturdays. I am the co-author of the Speaking in Color concept, where we talk about the different levels of communication, nurture versus nature, how you develop your communication, the kind of communicator you are, and then what you need to do to neutralize your communication and being the best communicator across the board with anyone that you meet, anyone that you talk to, and different tools that you can utilize to do that. So I encourage you guys on Instagram to go to B.E.S.T Publishing. Click the link in the bio to get your personalized copy. You can also get the personalized copy if you go to Jabez Enterprise Group. And there you can also purchase a personalized copy of the book, but we are available on all platforms. And once again, we just appreciate everybody who took their Saturday out to tap in with us, to communicate. Bernard, is there anything else that you wanted to say before we close?
I just thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. I appreciate the being able to have deep, very deep conversations and really get to the root of things, because I'm looking for places where people want to be real and get healed.
I got you. We got you here on 6 Saturdays. You'll definitely be back if you will have us. And if that is all, we just appreciate you guys. And have a great evening, a great rest of your Saturday. Remember, tomorrow is the first start of the week, so set your intentions for the week. And you guys have an awesome rest of your Saturday.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.